Hi,
Dr. Welcome.
thank you so much. Lovely to be here.
So for the viewers, welcome to India's second Metabolic Health Conference. So my name is Shashi. I'm a metabolic health coach and a member of DLife.in, India's oldest, biggest, and the only award-winning low-carb platform. So Anup Singh and me, we are the co-organizers for this historic event titled Metabolic Therapies. And today I want to welcome our special guest, Dr. Hassina Kajee from South Africa. Welcome, Dr. Hassina.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here, and it's very exciting to have so much attention in this area from India. So thank you very much for inviting me.
So I'll give a brief introduction about Dr. Hassina. Dr. Hassina Kajee is a integrative specialist physician with a background in academic and tertiary medicine. She turned her attention towards preventative medicine when she became alarmed at the increasing number of acute medical illness in patients with chronic disease associated with insulin resistance and obesity. So she is a co-founder of Eat Better South Africa with colleagues to address health in poor areas. And she's also co-founder and medical curriculum director of Nutrition Network South Africa. So Nutrition Network trains healthcare providers and coaches on the science and practice of ketogenic medicine. So she practices what she preaches in her own family. And she's very, very passionate about healthy eating for children and throughout the life later on also. So I want to welcome you again, Dr. Hassina.
Thank you so much, Shashi.
So I wanted to ask you that you are a mainstream medical doctor. How did you
Yes.
come into this world of low carb, or what we call as therapeutic carbohydrate restriction, or TCR?
Thank you so much, Shashi. So I have to start by mentioning my granny because we have an Indian heritage, and I grew up in a world where when you got cut, my granny put haldi on the cut, turmeric on the cut. Whenever natural sort of remedies were part of us growing up. And the value and the wisdom in food was something that was alerted to me throughout my childhood. I was aware of the food. Also, my father just made sure when we were growing up that he would tell us that this is too processed, but still I grew up on the standard American diet of cereal. And like a usual doctor going into medical school, I think all doctors who are watching will agree with me, and I say this with love in my heart, that we are a very arrogant bunch. We study a lot and we think that what we know is all there is to know, and that most answers are found in the textbook. And so, and I've got lots of friends who are doctors, and so I say this lovingly, but there is a hierarchy in medicine, and patients come to you, you're trained to give answers. You are trained to make a diagnosis as quickly as possible because the waiting rooms are getting fuller, the emergency rooms, the hospitals are fuller. And so there was no different in my case. What I noticed is it was my dream to work where I ended up working in tertiary medicine, teaching medical students, teaching registrars, and I ran the high care unit for our tertiary hospital. But what I noticed when I landed there, once my studies were over and that stress was over, was, my goodness, the patients that I'm seeing with these old people illnesses and heart attacks and strokes, they're in their 20s now. And what was even worse was their family who came to visit them were also obese. But even worse than that was that their children were overweight and coming in with packets of crisps and cool drink. And I could just see this unfolding just in the short time it took me to specialize, and landing there, I noticed there was one, I had 10 beds in my high care unit, and there was one particular day that every single bed was taken up by a patient who had had a heart attack. So I saw this as just a nonsensical way of living. As doctors, we became pull pushers. We were not teaching health. We were simply treating disease. And I had this vision of myself standing at the edge of the cliff and simply putting my arms out, and I could only catch one or two. At that time, I'd read about, Prof. Noakes was in the media, and I had great respect for him. But I was like, what's going on here? This doesn't sound like, what do you mean fat is healthy? And so I started to do my own research, and started with myself and my own family. My husband suffered with being overweight for most of his adult life. He lost weight, even though we were very active, he lost weight within a couple of weeks, similar to stories around the world. And I started to practice that in the hospital. And I saw amazing results in my staff. I had a program where staff started, I coached them for 6 weeks, and it was amazing. 25 pound, 10 kilogram loss of weight in 4 to 6 weeks. And I realized that I have this answer. And here's a big problem that I'm sitting with. And, slowly that became, it was fueled by seeing the disease around me.
Amazing. So I think so that you had a personal journey or a success story with low carb, and again, you were influenced by what Professor Noakes says or said. And I think that it's really amazing that as a medical doctor, you had an open mind to accept that. Usually, as you yourself told, that doctors are not very open-minded, but you did have an open mind. You adopted that and you had a success in yourself and your own family, and also in your patients.
It actually made no sense to me. One day we're taught in the diabetic clinic to tell the patients to eat brown bread and oats. And so I sat way before LCHF was a thing. I used to sit with patients and go, tell me what you're eating. And I would make a list of all the sugar that they were eating and the amount of bread and cool drink, and people just didn't know. And one day I was giving advice, which I said, well, instead of eating a white bread, choose the brown bread. And in my brain, I had this thought that, hang on, it's still carbs. I'm telling them to eat, they're still eating sugar. The other macronutrients are missing. But that was all we were taught. So when Prof. Noakes came on the scene, it was like the puzzle pieces started to fall into place when I went into the science and realized, in terms of the macromolecules you need for health, why are most people just existing on sugar?
Very interesting. Now, one of the major health issue which is there globally is obesity. Now, why is obesity, not, it is not associated with poor health? Generally, nowadays, there is a normalization of obesity. Even in India, when people are obese, paradoxically, people say a healthy person. And if a person is lean, they will say unhealthy. It's a paradox in India, and I'm sure this must be globally also. Why is it not associated with disease?
That's a good question. And it's a question I've personally and professionally tried to highlight. So any teaching that I do, I try to bring adipose tissue into the mix. So why it's not a thing is I think we have short-term memory loss, or as humans and generations, we don't think back to our grannies and great grannies and see how they looked. They didn't look the way we look. We've taken it as the norm. And I often say to patients, do you ever see this happening in the animal kingdom? I mean, I know your viewers watching think that in Africa we have lions roaming outside. It's not the case, but if you see a lion, is a lion going to be overweight? Does it progressively get bigger? No, in fact, it gets thinner and leaner. It loses muscle mass as it ages. It becomes thinner. Same with all animals in the wild. The only animals that don't follow this rule is domesticated animals like cats and dogs, where humans start to feed them table scraps. But I think that we are living in a world we're so disconnected with our own bodies. There's a disconnection with each other. There's a disconnection with our own minds. It's just the modern pace of life. People are so forced to think about income and schooling, and there's just so much noise. We've lost the art of sitting in meditation and sitting with ourselves and sitting with our family. We've become disconnected. And so it's easy to see that we're also disconnected with our bodies. And then the more we see out there and on the TV that the population across the world in the West is getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, we almost accept it as the norm. But if one message, the only message that, if you could take this away, whoever's watching, is it is not normal to gain weight. And that adipose tissue that we're gaining, it's actually an organ and I have a slide if I'm allowed to show later on, it's actually an organ that secretes hormones that disrupts the body in so many dangerous ways.
I think this is something people are not aware. In fact, I think as much as 8 type of cancers are also associated with obesity as per the studies. And we know that practically most of the metabolic health disorders are associated with obesity. But that is the paradigm we live in, that the more obese we are, the more overweight we are, people think that we are healthy. So now anyway, coming back to let us come to the other point. Now, food can be a source of health and it can also be a source of disease. So what is your view on this?
So you see, the thing is, we come from a history as we've grown, as the world has grown, we've come from food scarcity, right? We've also come from a time in the world where people were very isolated. Travel didn't happen as much. So if you lived in China, you were used to Chinese food. In India, you're used to Indian food. In France, and now we are in and food is delicious. And it is enticing, it is beautiful, and we all love food, and we should love food because it's sustaining. And in the Indian culture that I know, food is part of community. It's the way you show your love. The mum is busy from early in the morning before dawn, preparing the whole day. And that is your way of showing that you love your family. So we associate food in general with love, with togetherness, with maybe that disconnection we feel in modern times. Food brings the connection to remind us of our families and the way it used to be. The problem is that I think there's too much fusion happening. And so we know what we like and what our typical kind of food is, but we also want to add the Coke that wasn't part of our normal life. We want to add the crisps and the jelly beans and the candy and the other types of food. But mostly it's not about that. It's that people don't realize that the food industry is not the health industry. The food industry is not there to make you healthy. It is there to get bigger yachts and more homes in all parts of the world. It's there to make the people in the food industry rich. And the more, like any business, people want you to buy more food. So if I make M&Ms, I'm looking at the sale of M&Ms, and I want the M&Ms or whatever candy bar or whatever it is, McDonald's, whatever it is, I want the sales to go up. How will I do that? I have to make my food more delicious. How do I do that? Sugar and fat. And there are food scientists that work on getting that sweet spot just right so that these things become addictive to people, that they need it. So, and it's not really like a vicious thing where people are plotting for the downfall of the world, I don't think. It's just simple. It's money. And people don't realize that making these foods taste better causes more harm for the body, specifically seed oils, polyunsaturated fatty acids, and sugar. That combination of sugar and fat is what makes the food more addictive, makes the brain, it hijacks the brain. And so we get that dopamine kick. It's addictive like cocaine. But at the same time, it is causing widespread tissue damage. And the reason I'm so passionate about this is because the most vulnerable, the children, are being affected. Even the children in your womb as a pregnant woman that you're carrying, they are being affected even before they come into the world. So this is something that we have to be very aware of. We have to start becoming more disciplined as human beings. We have to start taking control of our lives, driving our own cars, and not allowing these things we don't even know they're controlling us. We have to start learning about it so we can take more control.
I wanted to ask you, how big is sugar addiction in South Africa? See, India, I'll put the context. India is one of the largest producers of sugar. US is one of the largest consumers. The per capita consumption is very high. So where does South Africa lie? Have the local indigenous people, they have shifted more towards sugar from the traditional diet? How is it?
We are one of the most obese countries in the world. We ourselves, in fact, my family home comes from a sugar plantation. Around my great-grandfather's house were sugarcane fields in Tongaat in KwaZulu-Natal. That's where the big factory, Hewlett's, is in South Africa. But the indigenous people of South Africa have completely turned towards processed food. Why? Because it's cheaper, it's easier to gain access, not just sugar, but obviously things like flour, maize. It's much easier, which is why we founded Eat Better South Africa, which is why when I was working in public health, I contacted Prof. Noakes to say, thus far, this idea of this Banting low-carb diet, it's seen as a rich man's diet. And so we need to make it accessible to everybody. And it was amazing when people understood that food eating does not have to be, it's not expensive. In fact, the people that we had in our groups, post the group, once they'd lost their weight, and we did an analysis of the amount of money they were spending before when they were eating healthy and after, they were spending, some of them were spending less money on food than they were spending before. But yeah, to answer your question, it's a huge problem in South Africa across the board, public health, private medicine. It's massive, and it's something that we need to be talking about more often.
So sometime back you just mentioned about children obesity, and now when does the healthy practice start? Can we say that does it start with the pregnancy itself, so that the not only mother but even the child can grow up to be more healthy? What is your view on this context?
So it starts even before that, because a female is born with the eggs that will become. When I was carrying my daughter, when I was pregnant with her, the eggs within her were already produced that will, God willing, become my grandchildren in the future. So it starts as early as that. But even before that, it's the mind of the mother, of the parents, of that mindfulness that is part of healthy living. But in terms of just pure nutrition, people assume that there's this myth that I have diabetes in my family, so I'm going to get it. I'm big boned. I have obesity, it runs in the family. It may run in the family, but studies are showing that it's only about 20% of your genetics that plays a role in obesity. Maybe 20-something%. The rest is lifestyle. And the role that lifestyle plays is, we call it the loaded gun theory. So, like a gun that's loaded. So yes, you may be loaded with the diabetes bullet, hypertension, stroke, whatever it is. But if you don't pull the trigger, you're not going to get that disease. How do you pull the trigger is important. You pull the trigger by eating foods that cause that inflammation in your body, that switches on diabetes factory. Diabetes doesn't come overnight. It takes years to develop it, right? Hypertension, all of these diseases associated with obesity. And so if as a pregnant woman, you are eating mindlessly, you are exposing your own bloodstream and therefore the body of your unborn child to high levels of inflammation. That is why diabetic moms have bigger babies. Why? Because insulin is a growth hormone. A growth hormone means it makes things grow bigger. Now people think, oh, so what? I'm a little big. No, but it stimulates other things like cancers to grow, and the inside of your blood vessels, and all of this is what leads to the things that cause so much heartache, so much time of people spending their time in hospital, spending their hard-earned money on medication and seeing the doctor instead of enjoying their retirement and enjoying their time and being a productive member of society. So the bottom line is, it starts way earlier. And then don't think that, oh, children, let them be a child. We hear this all the time. I just want to spoil him or her. Let him be a child. Maybe your body has capacity to deal with some, but it must never become a habit. And if you can stay away from it completely, even better.
Very interesting. I think the viewers should take, should listen to this, and they should understand that you don't need to act after you get a disease. In fact, you should act even before you get a disease. And I think that's where you told about genetics. A little expanding on this topic of genetics. In India, we say that, genetically we are prone to diabetes. Genetically we are prone to cardiovascular disease. So what is it? Is it a final death sentence? Or can we change the trajectory? And what is this epigenetics about? Can you little elaborate on this?
So can I share my screen with you?
Please, please, please.
Okay. So, is this no? Not finding this. Just give me a minute.
Yeah.
Or maybe this is a different system. Oh, here we go. Tell me if you're able to see my screen.
It's just coming.
Yes.
Few more seconds. Few seconds.
Okay.
It's just being shared.
Oh,
Yeah,
it's
we can
loading.
see it.
So the first thing I want to show is epidemiology. It's the what we used to be and what we're having now. And this isn't this is the if I say up to 2012, if you just look from 1988 until 2012, the number of people with metabolic syndrome has increased. And I'll come to what metabolic syndrome is. Now look at the stats for children. So the top left hand is waist circumference, blood pressure, glucose, your triglycerides, your HDL, and then metabolic syndrome. And all of these are components. So if somebody has components of these, obesity, blood pressure, high glucose, abnormal fats, they have metabolic syndrome. If you focus on the last graph, you see the number of children with class 3 obesity and metabolic syndrome has just increased. And so we've got a situation where even our children are diabetic and they're learning to manage it on insulin. But what's the problem with metabolic syndrome? It's this. The root cause is insulin resistance. And I'll show you a slide, Shashi. I know you know my favorite insulin slide.
Yeah.
But all of these things, chronic inflammation in the body, oxidative stress, inflammation, hypertension, high blood sugar, prothrombotic state means that your blood clots more easily. All of this is due to, I'm just going to go to, I'll share my whole screen here. This is it seems like a very complicated slide, but it's my favorite slide because it shows why all these diseases occur. And if you look on the left-hand side, this is as an example of the insulin, a model of the insulin receptor. Now, when your insulin docks on that receptor in a healthy person, it causes all of these downstream effects you see on the left and right, the metabolic arm, which is it puts away glucose and it does all the things you're supposed to do. And on the right side, it can cause growth where it needs to cause growth. If you look on the right-hand side, at very high levels of insulin, which is what you get when you eat a very poor diet and you're obese. If you have obesity or you're gaining weight, you can simply assume that you have insulin resistance. And what happens is those very high levels, they activate the right-hand side of the insulin receptor called the mitogenic arm. And this is the arm that causes growth, proliferation, atherosclerosis, inflammation. And it is indeed this part that results in all of these diseases. Can you see me now?
Yeah, I can see you.
Okay, I've lost you on the screen. Okay, there we go.
Yeah.
So it's impossible to talk about this without talking about insulin resistance. All of these bad foods that I'm talking about, they stimulate your body to produce more insulin in order to lower your blood glucose. And at low levels of insulin is a hormone. It's pulsatile. It needs to come, do its job, go away. When it's there all the time, your body is, it's like being shouted at all the time. When a child does something wrong and you say, hey, imagine you keep shouting, that's going to cause damage. In the same way, this constant existence of insulin in your bloodstream, it results in very sticky blood, thick blood vessels. And so if you're susceptible to heart disease, that's pulling the trigger. That's what's causing the clot to happen in your blood vessels. If your susceptibility is strokes, then you're going to have it in your brain. If you are susceptible to high blood pressure, then it's going to contribute to all the factors that cause your blood pressure to go up. So it's not that, whoever's got this family history, never believe that, it's just, even if you have it, you can reverse it very quickly. In my experience, I've taken patients off high blood pressure pills in as little as 1 week. I've reduced their medication simply by changing what they eat. And many people are completely medication free. Once you lose that weight, you've taken away the culprit.
Very interesting. I think the slides also presented it very interesting and little terrifying also to see the amount of obesity or the whole insulin resistance or metabolic syndrome going up in children also. I mean, it is what kind of future generation we'll have. And the similar situation exists even in India. In fact, just before in the inauguration, we had one endocrinologist from India who's low carb. So she was spelling out all the kind of the data in India, the kind of childhood obesity, insulin resistance, pre-diabetes, high triglyceride among children. I mean, this is really terrifying. In fact, there was a news just few days back in my city where I stay in Mumbai. The teenagers seems to have very high degree of insulin resistance and pre-diabetes condition. Obesity is well known, fatty liver is well known. So I think it is unfortunately. So you believe that even though we may be genetically prone to certain disease, we can still avoid it or change its trajectory. That's what you mean.
Absolutely. I mean, if you understand, this is science. If you understand epigenetics, your genes are one level, but your genes have direction. There's a plan for your genes. The genes switch on what you tell it to switch on. And so if you are in a state of insulin resistance, you've hijacked the homeostatic healthy systems in your brain. And so the safety mechanisms no longer exist. So now when insulin comes in, insulin says, hey, I'm the storage hormone. When I'm here, it's because you're hungry. If I'm here, it means I need to stock up. We're stocking up. And so insulin says, my job is to load fat. Now your fat tissue says, oh, but I'm full. Well, I don't know what to do because I've been told to stock fat. That's my instruction. Store fat. Stop burning fat. Doesn't matter that you have 200, 300 pounds or, to burn. All I know is when I'm around, I store fat. And so what happens is that fat, we only have after adolescence, a certain amount, most people have a set amount of adipocytes, which is fat cells. Very few, a small percentage of the population can make more fat cells, but for the vast majority, we have a limited number of fat cells. This is terrifying because once your fat cell, and I can share my screen again because I think it makes the point really well that
it's just coming.
Yeah.
There we go.
So this is a diagram of what a cross-section of the body. So if you look at the outside, you see subcutaneous fat. This is the fat that you would pinch underneath your skin. But deep inside in the abdomen, that orangey brown fat, that's called visceral fat. And that visceral fat, so if you consider that insulin is coming in and it says, hey, I need to store fat, and the fat cells are numbered. So I just want to see if I have, here we go. So if you look at this diagram on the left is the way it should be. Fat has a certain amount of a number of blood vessels, and it can supply energy and blood to those fat cells. But look at the right, And on the right, we have stretched those fat cells to capacity. And those fat cells are now screaming in the form of hormones, in the form of cytokines, which says to our immune system, we are in danger, send help. And the immune system gets activated. And when the immune system is activated, it starts to send immune cells to this area. Now, the scary thing is fat tissue is an endocrine organ. It secretes hormones. It communicates with the brain. It communicates with the pancreas, with the liver, with the muscle. So basically, before we know it, we have a situation like this. Sorry. We have a situation like this where we have a lean, healthy person here with a normal amount of white adipose tissue, not overstuffed. Look at the person on the right. The reason that we had so many people during COVID dying that were overweight, and so many people post-COVID, they unmasked their diabetes, is because they were pre-diabetic anyway. They were in a state where they had all of these inflammatory cells roaming around their body. They had a situation where their fat cells, were secreting all of these mediators, talking constantly to the brain, talking constantly to the liver, more importantly, talking constantly to the immune system to say, I am in danger, I am being attacked. And we know that when we talk to the immune system, when we tell the immune system, I need help, we want the immune system to come. So when you cut and you're bleeding, you don't want to keep bleeding. You want it to clot. Similarly, when you're talking to the immune system like this, you're promoting the coagulation in your body. So this is that vascular inside the blood vessels, what's going on. This is the thing that people are not talking about. People are worried about fat causing you to have a heart attack when this is the root cause of inflammation throughout the body.
Very interesting. So I will say the analogy, like, okay, there is a missile heading down to destroy us. So we do have an anti-missile system in form of lifestyle change, which can change the trajectory. It can blow it mid-air so that it doesn't affect us. Probably said that's what you mean. And with insulin resistance being the root cause, I think we should be able to identify insulin resistance quite early and take preventive measures. One of them is, of course, low-carb nutrition, and then activity, and so on. I think this very important point you do mention, and you also explain the concept of what do you say, that how we change epigenetics very well. So that's the word I was missing, that we can change the trajectory very well. So can you tell us something about the ketogenic textbook itself? You were part of that. How
Yes.
what so what is the yeah. So
very clear.
it has sort of become a Bible of reference for all of us, that we can rely on ketogenic textbook. Do tell something about it in very short, that what went into it, what are the updates, how it is used very well now, and any other updates you want to share on the book.
Thank you for that. So, when we started the Nutrition Network, we realized that there are people all around the world who are working in isolation. Doctors especially felt very isolated with no colleagues to talk to, nowhere else to get their information but Twitter and online. And so it was to, one, advertise the knowledge that is existing out there, because there's a lot of knowledge and a lot of experts in the field. And number two, it is to not be isolated. Why? Let's create our own community. We have so many people who need help. And so that was the idea behind the creation of Nutrition Network. And as the years went on and we were trying to, you must have also realized that there are a lot of doctors who come to this way of life because they have, or not even coaches and whoever takes this as their new passion. It's because they've experienced it, personally, and they want to help other people. They actually they become passionate about it. And so we needed to reach more people. And what we realized is that you do what you know, you trust what you know. What do medical professionals trust? We trust a textbook. And there's so much information that when a colleague asks you or somebody asks you, you pull out your files that you have stored on your computer. But now we have a situation where if you want to know something about cardiology and all of the, it's in the cardiology section, there's an endocrine section, and it's by experts in the field. It's all scientific papers. It is very balanced, where we see that more evidence is required, more research is required. We've been very honest about that. We've shown the role of therapeutic carbohydrate restriction in the reversal and management of so many diseases. So it is no longer anecdotal. And the way it's helped is that we've heard from healthcare providers, coaches all over the world to say that they can't do without this book because they constantly refer to it. One thing I want to share, we had our 10-year Noakes Foundation celebration last week. And in the talk, Prof said that Mickey Bendor, who's one of the authors of the book, let him know that there was a Chinese doctor who learned about LCHF, and he wanted to teach his fellow colleagues. And as he started to promote LCHF, he got fined. So his Health Professions Council came down on him and said, if somebody laid a complaint, a charge against him. And he went to the hearing and he took the book and he quoted from the book and he showed this study and this study and this study. And they said to him, basically the charge is farcical. He was cleared with help from the textbook. So Mickey Bendor's words were, your textbook has gotten a Chinese doctor, prevented him from getting into jail. So we're very proud of it, but it is a book that requires updates, and that's being done. Any errors or any areas that we need to expound on, that's being looked at, and so in the next edition, we'll be able to tackle all those things.
I think yes. Now the world of therapeutic carbohydrate restriction, especially on the ketogenic front, is expanding like anything. You also know, especially on the mental health, neurological health, with so many new studies coming in, breakthrough studies from as good as the institute like Stanford. So I think those things deserve a mention. An upgrade may be necessary in coming times.
Absolutely. I mean, and that's the thing about science, it never sits still. You have to be also, if you're a scientist, you have to be able to question yourself and say, like Prof tore the pages out of his book, you have to be able to say, I was wrong, or hey, there's more information. And that's exactly it. The point is that too many people are suffering in the world, and it is unnecessary that you suffer due to food. And so just if you know someone who's suffering, if you're watching this and you're not convinced, but you have a little bit of an interest, please, there's so much research out there, and there's so many. Nutrition Network has trained over 7,000 practitioners and coaches all over the world. We have an active forum where people are constantly sharing their cases, sharing their wins, so we know we have the evidence that it is impacting lives in our lifetime. Many people feel that when you start this new change, you're not going to see the impact in your lifetime. But you know yourself, Shashi, that you're seeing the results within weeks. You're seeing people change their lives. So it is something that is worth doing. If you're interested in this, you owe it to yourself. You owe yourself that life.
And that's why as soon as the book came, I ordered it and got it immediately. So I had displayed that prominently even in the first event. I carried the book with me, but this time I couldn't carry. But I think, and it is there in the live stream front page. So in the live stream front page, ketogenic book textbook is there prominently so that everyone can see. So something which this book is going to be on our live stream page as long as we conduct our metabolic health conference. This book is going to be displayed prominently, and this is our promise. And I think that
Awesome.
is a small thing we can do. And of course, I'm also part of Nutrition Network community, as you know very well. So,
Yes.
I have one question coming in from one of the viewers. So it's going to be a little easier. It says that it become very difficult to decrease insulin resistance having dawn phenomena. How to solve it? I hope you don't mind taking this question. Is one of
No,
our
of course
viewers,
not. Yeah.
uh, how
So,
how how you solve dawn phenomena? Yeah.
right. So, you know what? Dawn phenomenon, don't worry about it. Think about it like this. You developed pre-diabetes or diabetes over a number of years, 8, 10, 12 years. People get worried about dawn phenomenon, right? Dawn phenomenon means that it's everybody around something like that, early hours of the morning. It is normal to get a spike in all your hormones, your glucagon spike, insulin spike, cortisol spike, all of these hormones spike to get you ready for the day. What happens in the normal, non-insulin resistant adult is that we get a glucagon spike and we get an insulin spike, but the glucagon raises your blood sugar and the insulin will bring it down. We have the ability to bring it down so it doesn't reach the disease range. In diabetics, because you are still recovering, your insulin resistance is you're still recovering from it. When you get that glucagon squeeze, your insulin is not enough, your receptors are just not sensitive yet to bring it down. What's more, so if you keep on with this, don't get discouraged. But if you keep on with it, you might find 1 year, 2 year, 3 years later, your sugar, your dawn phenomenon, your early morning insulin, that's come down. What's more important to check is that your postprandial sugar is in order, your postprandial blood glucose, sorry, I said insulin, your sugar that you're checking in the morning, but your postprandial blood glucose needs to be, so what you're eating, if your sugar stays low, then you're giving your body all that it needs to heal your insulin resistance. That insulin resistance takes a while. So the way to check that you're doing well is to check your postprandial blood sugar.
I think
I
this is
actually tell
something.
people not to check their fasting, not to worry, because it freaks people out. Because they go, I've
Yeah.
done so well, I ate this, I exercised, I'm looking so good, everything's fine, I just can't get that early morning. It will happen. Your body will do it in time. So don't even worry about it. Check it like every few months rather than every week.
I think that answers the question. Now, personally, in my own experience, see, I achieved diabetes remission in the 4th month itself from the diagnosis, but it took me quite some time to get that fasting blood sugar from that 105, 110 range to sub 100 range. So it took
Right.
me around a couple of years to really see that 90, 95 consistently. Now I'm able to see even as low as 80, 85 most of the days. But
Wonderful.
even today it impacts if I sleep less, the blood sugar spike I see morning is something different. So it took me a
You
lot
see,
of years. See, so
yes.
it's 8.5 years in diabetes remission. Even today, I do see a spike in fasting, but postprandial number remains very nice. So so the viewer who asked this question, so let me tell you that you need to be little patient, because to get the diabetes, you have reached this stage after many years. You need to wait for some more time before you will really gain, the true remission or the lower blood sugar reading. So I don't be disheartened, and this is a journey and not a destination, is what I can say.
And it's actually not a sign of failure. If your blood sugar in the morning is high, it's how can we say it's, as long as you know it is coming down. But there are some things you can do to sort of hasten the journey. You can employ fasting as a tool. So you can either do 24-hour fast or you can do time restricted eating, depending on your baseline. If you're able to, once you are fat adapted, you may find that you can do longer fasts. That's one way to hasten the recovery. Another way is, as Shashi said, make sure that you're getting the lifestyle things. Your sleep is in order. You don't have a lot of mental stress, cortisol is the one most difficult thing that prevents a lot of people from getting over their insulin resistance. So employ things like exercise, walking, boundaries, talking, and that type of thing. And then building muscle is something that we do not talk about, but making sure you can lift some weights, do exercises, not just running, but weight-bearing exercises. The more you grow your muscle, the more it can suck up that glucose and help you to become insulin, improve your insulin sensitization.
Thank you, Dr. Hassina. I think it was a wonderful discussion, and we are coming to the end of the session. I'll invite Anup Singh. Anup, please come in. Please take Anup in. So Anup is my co-organizer. So Dr. Hassina Kajee, thank you very much for coming to India and sharing your knowledge. Yeah, Anup.
Yeah, Shashi, if I can add to what welcome, doctor. Now, what Dr. Hassina said, about FBS. I've been always saying if your FBS is high, compensate it with low PPBS. As simple as that.
Thank you.
Well, I didn't get that.
If FBS is high, yeah, I had it. I mean, my PPBS used to be 190, but my FBS used to be 110. I was not worried at all.
Yeah. I think the more people who realize this, because we teach them to track their sugar, but we don't prepare them in advance. So I prepare my patients in advance, and I say, now this is going to happen. You're going to see this. One thing I want to mention that helped my own father is many people are dairy intolerant and they don't realize it. So their sugar, they get a massive that 2 point whatever, massive reaction. If you try cutting out dairy and see what that does to your blood glucose, it might very well help you to maintain a better blood glucose. But thank you very much for having me.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
I'm so glad that there's so much interest in ketogenic lifestyle, and all the very best to everybody who is on this journey.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you very much.